I never thought a pair of headphones would be the reason my entire family stopped speaking to me. But here I am, sitting in a quiet apartment, wondering if I'm the villain for choosing my own joy over their narrow-minded expectations. They told me I was obsessed, that my love for K-pop was a mental sickness, and that I was embarrassing the family name by worshipping a culture that wasn't mine. But the breaking point came when my own mother tried to destroy the one thing that kept me sane during the darkest year of my life. Was I wrong for finally snapping and cutting them all out after they staged a literal intervention to take away my music? Or would you have stood your ground too? I need you to listen to the whole story before you judge me, because what they did under the guise of caring was nothing short of psychological warfare. It all started about 3 years ago when I was going through a really rough patch. I had just lost my job. A long-term relationship had ended in a messy betrayal, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of gray. One afternoon, a random music video popped up on my feed. It was vibrant, the choreography was perfect, and the lyrics, even before I looked up the translation, felt like a warm hug. That was my introduction to K-pop. It wasn't just about the catchy beats. It was about the community, the messages of self-love, and the sheer dedication these artists put into their craft. For the first time in months, I felt motivated to get out of bed, to learn a new language, and to actually care about something again. I started collecting albums, not because I was obsessed, but because the photo books and the physical media felt like art to me. I started attending local cup sleeve events, and made friends who didn't judge me for having a hobby that made me smile. But to my parents and my older brother, Mark, this was a sign that I was losing my mind. They've always been very traditional and honestly, a bit elitist about Western culture. They see anything they don't understand as inferior or childish. At first, it was just small comments at Sunday dinner, like Mark asking why I was listening to manufactured noise, or my mom sighing when she saw a poster on my bedroom wall. I'm 24 years old, I pay my own bills, and I live in my own space, so I thought I could just ignore it. But then I had to move back home for 6 months while my new condo was being finished. And that's when the nightmare truly began. Every single morning started with a lecture. My mother would linger in the doorway while I was getting ready for work, eyeing my desk where I kept a small, neatly organized shelf of my favorite albums. She would talk about how distracting the colors were, and how I needed to focus on adult decorations like neutral tones and family portraits. I tried to explain to her that these albums were essentially my version of a vinyl collection, but she just couldn't grasp it. My brother, Mark, was even worse. He started sending me links to articles about crazed fans and the dark side of the industry, acting as if he were some investigative journalist trying to save me from a cult. He would burst into my room without knocking while I was watching a variety show and mock the language, making fun of the way the idols spoke or dressed. It was constant, low-level harassment that slowly wore me down. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home, hiding my interests just to have a peaceful dinner. I started wearing my noise-canceling headphones almost 24/7, just to avoid the snide remarks. But that only made them angrier. They claimed I was isolating myself and that the music was brainwashing me into ignoring my family. The irony was that they were the ones making me want to disappear. The situation in that house became a psychological prison. I remember one specific Tuesday where I had worked a double shift. I was exhausted, and all I wanted to do was watch a live stream of a comeback showcase. I was in my room, voice low, just enjoying the talent and the hard work of these artists. Suddenly, the Wi-Fi cut out. I went downstairs to check the router, and there was my father, sitting at the kitchen table with the power cord in his hand. He looked at me with this chillingly calm expression and said, "If you can't be present with your family, you don't need the internet." I tried to explain that I was a grown woman who paid for her own phone data and contributed to the household bills, but he just shook his head. He told me that as long as I lived under his roof, he was the guardian of my soul. It sounds like something out of a cult movie, doesn't it? He genuinely believed that my interest in another culture was a spiritual threat. He started inviting the local pastor over for coffee, which always turned into a prayer circle for my confused mind. They would sit around me in the living room, and the pastor would ask me if I felt empty inside, and if that's why I filled my life with foreign idols. I felt like I was being interrogated for a crime I didn't commit. One evening, My parents invited over some of their friends from the local community, people who were just as traditional and judgmental as they were. I was tired from a long shift and just wanted to grab a glass of water, but my dad cornered me in the kitchen. In front of everyone, he introduced me as his daughter who thinks she's a teenager. He told them all about how I spent my hard-earned money on foreign boy bands, and laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. I stood there, frozen, as these strangers looked at me with pity and disdain. One woman actually told me that I should pray for a more mature spirit. I felt so humiliated. When I finally retreated to my room, I realized that they weren't just annoyed by my hobby. They were actively trying to strip away my identity to make themselves look better in their social circles. They viewed my happiness as an embarrassment. They began spreading rumors in our neighborhood that I was struggling with my mental health, which led to awkward encounters at the grocery store where neighbors would give me sad smiles and ask if I was feeling better today. It was a calculated effort to gaslight me into believing I actually was crazy. As the weeks went by, the surveillance intensified. My mother started going through my trash to see if I had bought new merchandise. She would check my mail and hold my packages hostage until I explained what was inside. One time, I ordered a specific brand of Korean skincare that my favorite artist happened to use. And when she saw the Korean text on the box, she actually threw the unopened package into the kitchen sink and turned on the water. She told me she was protecting our home from outside influences. I was living in a state of constant anxiety. I would park my car a block away just so I could listen to my music in peace for 20 minutes before walking into the house. I had to hide my light stick in a suitcase under my bed, wrapped in old sweaters, like it was some kind of illegal contraband. The psychological toll was becoming unbearable. I was a grown woman, a successful professional. Yet I was being treated like a delinquent child because I liked music that wasn't in English. I even started having dreams that my family was burning my clothes because they weren't traditional enough. My sense of safety was completely gone. My brother Mark then decided to take it a step further. He started recording me when I was practicing dance covers in my room. I've always loved dancing. It's my main form of exercise and it makes me feel powerful. But Mark would film me through the crack in the door, and then post the videos to our family group chat with captions like, "Look at the circus act," or "Someone get her a doctor." When I confronted him, he just laughed and said he was concerned about my repetitive movements. My father joined in, saying that instead of dancing like a pop star, I should be at the gym working on my marriageability. Every single aspect of my joy was being dissected and mocked. They weren't just attacking the music, they were attacking my autonomy, my body, and my sense of self. I started having panic attacks every time I heard my mother's footsteps in the hallway. I was counting down the days until my condo was ready, but I didn't realize they had a final solution planned before I could move out. They had actually contacted a local counseling center that specialized in deprogramming. They were planning to force me into a retreat where I would be stripped of my phone and forced to listen to lectures about the dangers of pop culture. Things escalated when they found out how much I had spent on a VIP ticket for a world tour coming to our city. It was my money, saved from my bonus, but to them, it was proof of my addiction. My mom actually sat me down with a printed-out article about parasocial relationships, and told me she was worried I was losing touch with reality. I told her that I was perfectly fine, that I had a great job, friends, and a life, and that this was just my passion. But they weren't listening. They started calling my friends, asking them if I talked about the music too much. They were literally trying to build a case that I was mentally ill. One night, I came home to find my bookshelf empty. My albums, my limited edition lightstick, my signed posters, everything was gone. I panicked. I ran to the living room where my parents and Mark were sitting, looking like they were waiting for me. My mom had this smug, "I'm doing this for your own good" look on her face. She told me they had donated my collection to clear the negative energy from the house, and that they were canceling my concert ticket because I needed a digital detox. I felt my blood turn to ice. That collection wasn't just paper and plastic. It represented my recovery from depression. It was the only thing in that house that felt like me. So that is the situation I was pushed into. My family literally stole my property and tried to control my life, because they didn't approve of my music taste. They thought they could break me into being the perfect daughter they wanted. They saw my joy as a threat and my hobby as a disease. They didn't care about the fact that I was thriving in my career, or that I was finally happy after years of struggling with my mental health. All they cared about was their own comfort, and their narrow definition of what a proper, young woman should be. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, and how I walked away from them forever, I want you to pause and comment below. What would you have done if your family threw away something that meant everything to you? Would you forgive them because they're family, or would you have done what I did? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at them and asked where my stuff was. Mark laughed and said it was already at the landfill. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I realized they didn't love me. They loved the idea of controlling me. I walked out of the house, drove to a hotel, and spent the night documenting every single item they had donated. Because I'm a person who keeps receipts, literally. I had the invoices for every album and the market value for the rare, out-of-print items they threw away. I had photos of my shelves from just a week prior for insurance purposes. The total came to over $4,000. People don't realize how expensive some of these limited editions and signed items can get, especially when you include the shipping and customs fees from Korea. To my parents, it was junk, but to the law, it was high-value personal property. I stayed up until 4 a.m., categorizing every photo card, every limited edition vinyl, and every piece of official tour merch. My heart was breaking with every line I wrote, but my resolve was hardening. I spent that entire night in the hotel room, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and liberation. I realized that for years, I had been making myself small so they could feel big. I had let them insult my intelligence and my tastes because I was afraid of the conflict. But there is no conflict worse than the one within yourself when you allow people to destroy who you are. I decided right then that I was done being a victim. I wasn't just going to move out. I was going to hold them accountable. I was going to show them that my life and my belongings had value, whether they understood that value or not. I didn't care if it looked bad to outsiders. I didn't care if they called me ungrateful. You cannot be ungrateful to people who violate your basic rights as a human being. I spent the early hours of the morning researching the specific laws regarding domestic theft and property damage in my state. I wanted to make sure that when I struck back, it was legally sound and devastatingly effective. The next morning, I didn't call them. I didn't send a single text. I went straight to the police station and filed a report for grand theft and destruction of property. When the officer asked if I wanted to press charges against my own family, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. I felt a strange sense of calm. For years, I had let them walk all over me because family comes first, but they had proven that they didn't consider me family at all. They considered me a project. 2 days later, while my mom was hosting her weekly bridge club, the police showed up at her door. The look of sheer horror on her face when she was served with a summons was the most vibrant thing I'd seen in years. She tried to tell the officers it was a family matter, but the law doesn't care about your family drama when you've stolen $4,000 worth of goods. The officers even told her that if she didn't cooperate, it could escalate to a felony charge. Mark was furious. He called me screaming, saying I was ruining the family over kiddie music. He told me I was being a spiteful brat, and that I should be ashamed for putting our parents through this stress. I told him that I wasn't ruining the family. Their lack of respect and their theft did that. I told him that if he didn't stop calling me, I would file a restraining order against him too. That shut him up real quick. But the pressure didn't stop there. My aunts and uncles started calling, leaving long voicemails about filial piety and how I was breaking my mother's heart. They acted like I was the one who had committed a crime. They couldn't understand why I was so upset over some pictures of boys. It became very clear that none of them understood the concept of boundaries or personal autonomy. They truly believed that because they shared my DNA, they had a right to my possessions and my mind. I even received a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, telling me I was evil for involving the police. I blocked every single one of them. I didn't stop there. I knew they wouldn't pay the restitution willingly, so I went to small claims court. I brought evidence of their intervention. including a recording I had made on my phone of that final confrontation where my mom admitted to throwing the stuff away because she didn't like looking at it. I also brought the receipts and the current market prices from eBay for the rare items. The judge was appalled. He didn't care about K-pop. He cared about the law. He told my parents that regardless of their personal opinions on my hobbies, they had no right to destroy my property. He actually gave them a lecture on the fact that I was a legal adult, and they were lucky I wasn't pursuing a more serious criminal case. They were ordered to pay back the full amount plus legal fees. My parents had to dip into their travel fund to pay me back. Seeing my dad write that check was the most satisfying moment of my life. It wasn't about the money, it was about the admission of guilt. They sat in that courtroom looking small and defeated. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the adult in the room. The aftermath was silent and cold. I spent the next month finalizing the move to my condo. I didn't tell them when I was leaving. I hired movers to come while they were at church. When they returned, I was gone. Not a single trace of me remained in that house. I had even taken the light bulbs I bought for my room. I wanted them to feel the emptiness they had created. I blocked every single family member on every platform. I changed my emergency contact at work to my best friend. I lived in a state of hypervigilance for a while, worried they would show up at my new place, but they didn't know where it was. I had finally achieved the detox my mother wanted, but it was a detox from their toxicity. I felt like I could finally breathe. I started decorating my new place exactly how I wanted, with bright colors, posters, and a massive shelf dedicated to my music collection. But the real revenge was my total silence. After the court date, I blocked all of them. I moved into my condo early, didn't give them the address, and changed my number. I deleted my social media profiles where they could track me and started fresh. I even contacted my HR department at work to ensure they weren't allowed to visit me or call the office. My aunt tried to reach out to me through a work email she found, saying that my mom was crying every day, and that the house felt empty. She said my mom was willing to forgive me for the court case if I just came home for Christmas. Forgive me? The audacity was staggering. I told my aunt that if my mom wanted to see me, she could start by acknowledging that my interests are valid, and that she has no right to dictate my joy. She couldn't do it. She still thinks she was saving me from a dangerous obsession. She told my aunt that I was lost to the music. It's been 6 months now. I went to that concert, and it was the best night of my life. I sat in the front row, and for those 3 hours, I didn't think about the court case or the empty seats at my family's dinner table. I felt a sense of belonging that I never felt in my own childhood home. I realized that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect and the freedom to be yourself. If they can't respect the things that bring you light, they don't deserve to be in your life. They told me I loved K-pop too much, but the truth is, they didn't love me enough to let me be happy. My life is so much quieter now, but it's a good kind of quiet. I don't have to hide my albums. I don't have to wear headphones in my own living room. I don't have to listen to jokes about my mental state while I'm trying to eat dinner. I've realized that I am not responsible for their unhappiness. If they are lonely in that big house, it's because they drove away the only person who tried to bridge the gap between their world and hers. I've started a small YouTube channel of my own now, dedicated to unboxing albums and sharing the joy of music. I use a pseudonym, and I don't show my face, but I've built a community of thousands of people who understand exactly what I went through. Every day, I get messages from people whose parents or partners try to take away their hobbies, telling them they're too old or too obsessed. I tell them my story to let them know they aren't alone, and that they have the right to fight back. My obsession, as my family called it, turned into a source of connection, and even a bit of extra income. I've replaced my collection, and every time I look at it, I'm reminded of my own strength. I'm not the crazy fangirl they tried to paint me as. I'm a woman who stood up for herself against people who tried to dim her spark. My mom still sends letters to my old address that eventually get forwarded, but I don't open them. I don't need her saving anymore. I saved myself. I've even started taking Korean language classes properly now. And I'm planning a trip to Seoul next year. I'm living the life they told me was a delusion. And it's more real and rewarding than anything they ever offered me. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever change. I wonder if they'll ever sit down and listen to a song and realize it's just music, not a threat to their way of life. But then I remember the look on my mother's face when she threw my skincare in the sink, and I realized that some people are more addicted to control than I could ever be to music. They chose their pride over their daughter. They chose their narrow worldview over my happiness. And that is a choice they have to live with every single day in that quiet, empty house. I am no longer their daughter who needs fixing. I am a person who is finally truly free. I've learned that the people who truly love you will celebrate your joy, even if they don't understand it. They won't try to crush it under the weight of their own insecurities. I have a new family now. A chosen family of friends and fellow fans who check in on me and support my passions. We have listening parties, we go to events, and we never, ever make each other feel crazy for loving something. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole mess, it's that you should never let anyone make you feel small for the things you love. Whether it's music, art, sports, or anything else that gives you a reason to smile. It is valuable. It is your spark. Life is way too short to spend it trying to please people who will never be satisfied anyway. If a song, a book, or a hobby makes your life worth living, hold on to it with both hands and never let go. Especially when people try to tear it away. Your joy is not a sickness and your passion is not a phase. It is the very thing that makes you human. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by pressing charges. Subscribe for more stories like this where we dive into the crazy things people do to fix others, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Have you ever had a family member try to control your hobbies or treat your passions like a sickness? How did you handle it? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'll see you all in the next story.